Hi again, folks. Welcome into UnAnchored Boston with Bob Lobel and Mike Lynch. Hope you all had a great St. Patrick's Day as we move forward to the second half of the month of March. And as always, we're brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course. And the great George Gray, the big wheel we call him, George Gray's Lexington Toyota 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. All right, speaking of greats, we have the great Kevin Paul Dupont on with us today to talk about what's right with the Bruins, what's wrong with the Bruins, what's going on around here. But we haven't talked to him since that massive trade. We have a special guest, maybe making an appearance, Glacier. We're not really sure if Glacier's going to get some FaceTime, but
it's going to be best in show.
Best in the show. There we go. Hi, Glacier.
Glacier, right there, buddy. Right there.
All right, Bob Lobel, as always, handles the introductions, and I know you got some real great wise-ass one-liners, Lobel, so take it away.
What do you mean, like the Bruins going to the Dogs or something like that? That was too easy. Well, Kevin, one of the most erudite sports writers you'll ever have an opportunity to read.
What was that word again?
Erudite. Well, you went to Harvard, except you haven't been able to find a library just yet. You went to erudite.
Erudite, full of hot air. Yeah.
Well, whatever you want to make it, you can make it that way. But anybody that enjoys reading, Kevin Paul Dupont is in for a treat. He was at the Herald. He was at the New York Times. He was at the Boston Globe. He grew up in Bedford, Massachusetts, and he's been the Bruins hockey writer since the world was flat, basically. And nobody does a better job at it than Kevin. He started off as a beat writer with the Globe in the hockey, and then transformed into this must-read columnist. One of their many ones, but one of the great ones that they've ever had. So we're always happy to have Kevin on. He won. Here, I got to ask you about the Elmer Ferguson Award that you won. Oh, yeah. Can you explain that? That was from the National Hockey League Hall of Fame. The Elmer Ferguson Award in 2019. Just exactly what was that about, Kevin? Don't be shy.
Well, I'll just correct you on one point there. It was actually 2002. The reason I'll correct you is this. My son at the time, he's now in his late 20s, but he was 5 at the time. So it's the Hockey Hall of Fame's honor. It's all the leagues do it. And there were 3 of us who started together at the Globe at the same time, me, Shaughnessy, and Leslie Visser, and we all worked under Neil Singleace, who was the schoolboy editor. This is in the mid-'70s. So we started together, and we were doing high school football, and lo and behold, all these years later, we're in the respective halls of fame for the sports we went on to cover. So.
That's pretty cool.
Dan at Cooperstown and Leslie at Canton. So, which is kind of amazing, given where we started and the fees we were working for. So, but the reason I was correcting you on the year is our son Gates at the time was 5, and I was about to be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and he was going around telling people that his dad was about to be abducted by the Hockey Hall of Fame.
That still may happen.
That's right. I had this image that I was shackled to some old radiator in the building. It's an old bank building in the center of Toronto, with raking a tin cup across the.
Funny.
So, but thank you for the very kind words. I appreciate that.
No, they're very much deserved. So I don't know, Lynch, if you want to start, or just I could ask him if he thinks Sweeney and Neely are really under the hot seat. I love the column about that emphasized the booze that rained down from the Boston Garden a week ago. I think that was the touchstone that just set so many things off. And I guess nobody knows better about the performance of their local team than Bruins fans.
Yeah, they take it personally. They take it passionately, which really, from my perspective, makes it fun to write about them. And that's true, I think, across the board. Although we could probably have a discussion here: what happens to Patriots fans when that bottoms out? I think the whole Patriots experience to have to drive out to Foxborough, I think it becomes an easy easier to let go if you're a Bruins fan. Red Sox, of course, people hung in there for all those years, the 86 years. But all of these, and certainly in our lifetime, right, guys, it's the mood and tenor of the fan and the experience. All that has changed so dramatically that when I started covering the Bruins in the late 70s, it was still that crowd of the gallery gods and sitting up in the second balcony and you could get in for cheap. And so the demographic of the audience has changed dramatically. But I still hear from and especially in these last few weeks, hearing from typically men who've been following the team since the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. Many of them have really become disheartened and angry, and whether that's going to force management to change or not, and when I say management, ownership to make some significant changes, which is what I touched on early on the or in the column over the weekend. We'll see. I have my doubts. I really don't know what Charlie Jacobs knows about hockey.
It was pretty obvious that when you point out that he gets all his information from Neely,
right?
That he knows what he's told.
Well, I mean, you've got a billionaire owner of the team advised most closely by two multimillionaire former players. That's pretty rarefied air, and I suppose that's a growing trend in all of these sports. But what the billionaire knows is what the millionaires are telling him. And, they have demonstrated here in recent years, really some poor decisions in the free agent market. And that's where they stand at the moment. They're going to have to go out and buy some players as of July 1. And if you look at Lindholm and if you look at Zadorov, the two free agent hires of last July, doesn't portend well at the moment.
I didn't know if we had a UFO landing there a couple of minutes ago. Son, I wasn't really sure if you actually were going to be abducted on this show.
Oh, the stories I could write.
But I'm looking through last night the list of Bruins captains, and other than Ray Bourque, who basically requested a trade and they accommodated him, yes. The Bruins have never traded away a captain, correct?
Joe Thornton was the captain at the time. I wouldn't say a distinguished captain, and then of course yes. Marchand recently, and that's hard to do. I mean, that was really a mercy trade. They would not have traded Ray Bourque if he didn't ask out. Yeah. And in the end, he wanted to go to Philadelphia, and Harry Sinden sent him to Colorado, and that turned out well for Ray. Right, he won the cup in what turned out to be his last game. Joe Thornton has certainly worked out well for his career. He went on to have an MVP season that year.
Why do you say distinguished captain? What distinguishes a distinguished captain from a regular captain?
Well, that's great. I mean, one thing, of course, would be the Hall of Fame. Ray had that locked up before he left. I think Joe put up the numbers that he's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame too. What I would say is at that stage of his career, I didn't get the sense of Joe. Joe was still growing into the job, and the job itself, the playing job, I didn't see he was a commanding presence was
Marchand a distinguished captain?
As a captain. Certainly with an asterisk, I would say. Distinguished in the sense that what are you looking for most? You're looking for the guy, and this is where Ray excelled. Joe Thornton wasn't there. You're looking for him to set an example of work ethic and competition. For me, that's where it comes down to. Does he really compete? Does he really have the work ethic? You can say a lot about Marchand, but I don't think you can doubt either of those. For his, what you can doubt is on the competition, his effort. He sometimes, especially up until his captaincy, would go over the line. In terms of competition, and we all know about the licking and the slew footing and all the things where he got into trouble and got, I don't know, suspended 8 or 9 times. That's not typical captain stuff, if you will. But as I say, for that frame definition of competition caring, compete, all of that. Really, really high on the charts, and in some ways rivaled Bork in that sense. Joe, no. Joe's a whole different spirit, great player, but whole different. He didn't go on to become a captain for the rest of his career, and I think that's the reason.
Do you think hockey, the moniker captain, hangs heavier around the neck of a hockey player as opposed to a baseball, football, or basketball player?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it can. I think like so many of these, I think very much like coaching. How great a coach are you? Well, show me the roster. You can make a million changes, 1,000,001 changes, and if you don't have the talent, and that's really where Joe Sacco is right now. I don't know what Joe's real upside is as a head coach. I know he's a very nice guy, very sincere, all those metrics. Handed a bad roster here as an interim coach in November, and that's a roster that's only gotten worse. So I hope no one's really judging his efficacy as a head coach off of what we've seen.
What do you think Jim Montgomery was judged properly? I mean,
I think in the end it was easy to get rid of Jim Montgomery, even though those 2 regular seasons were outstanding. It was easy because of what I would call pilot error or operator error in that first round knockout against Florida after the 65-12-5 season. He really didn't have any good responses as it was getting away that series. And then, of course, the next year they do beat Toronto, but they lose again. I think it became easy to say, based on that, it became an easy decision. And then of course, they were 8-9-3 at the time they let him go. So I think there were some questions too on a personal side, whether he really wanted to be here. And I can't say that showed up in the job, but I think they were getting strong indications that he'd prefer, and part of it is that he hadn't signed an extension, and that he had family stuff going on that Boston didn't seem to be a good fit.
That's good. That's really interesting.
All right, I want to look at the playoff standings right now, Dupes, and this is or is not going to happen for the Boston Bruins.
Is not, no. Yeah, and I'll tell you, if the most important metric there, and this is the crazy thing. I routinely get emails from casual NHL fans. How do I read the standings?
Right. I'm one of those.
Of course. That's just the way it is. So I don't even know what they are. Tell me, Lynch. Are they 2 points out tonight of that out of the wild card?
Montreal's at 73, and the Bruins are at 69. So,
okay, so they're 4 points, but that's really antiquated thinking. What you have to do, I don't know if you've got the NHL.com standings, but if you go to points percentage, which is like reading the old American League standings when only one team won the pennant, back in the Red Sox 67 days. Well, by that metric, points percentage, which is the most telling, they typically, I don't know what they are this morning, but typically of late, they've been 12th or 13th. That's the most telling statistic. When you're 12th or 13th in a conference that's only going to get 8, that tells you. Now, the difference between there is like 0.23 or 0.41 in terms of percentage of points. But at this stage of the game, it's too much of a hill to climb.
Well, the owners, like they do in all the other sports, can always add more playoff teams.
Yes.
By more wild cards. So to create the illusion of competition, which of course is, it's a bait and switch strategy.
Yeah, of all leagues, right? I mean, that's what it's about. It's like it's keeping the customer engaged. So what have they done in the course of our lifetime? Customer engagement has to be defined as putting more teams in, however the crazy math works, or teams in the Sun Belt win on Friday afternoon, whatever it is, right? These crazy metrics of how they get in. And the other one, the biggest one, I suppose there's 3. I'll put an asterisk on on fan engagement based on analytics. Again, I can't stand it, but there's a whole group of fandom out there now is hooked on analytics. But the other big one, fan engagement, betting, and that's when you talk to the owners who want to sort of put it off to the side, that basically in the legalized gambling industry now, they call it fan engagement. Okay, I guess it is. And not for me. I mean, there are times I look at it and say, boy, I bet this would be great tonight to bet the Red Sox or bet, but I wouldn't want to go down that rabbit hole. And
you're expected to gauge the team's success on how close they are to making the playoffs. I mean, the goal becomes making the playoffs. The goal, right. I mean, it's ridiculous. And we all know that it's a gambling industry. And it's ironic that Delaware North, has their background in racetracks and horse racing and they grew up on gambling. And
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That helped build the empire that is Delaware North, privately owned business that technically doesn't own the Bruins. It's technically the family, but whatever, those firewalls exist. I mean, but again, it's legal. You can do it. Whether you find that fan engagement is up to you. Obviously, guys, as we know, a lot of people do. A lot of people can find.
I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty myself of reading a Kevin Dupont, finding out where they are in the standings as far as making the playoffs, because I want to see playoff hockey in Boston, because we all know it's a different world. But because we're conditioned to see them in the playoffs, we're conditioned to see them losing to the Florida Panthers. We're conditioned
Yeah, I mean, and part of the conditioning on the good side of this discussion is it is a great time when the hockey team you like gets in, and this is true across the whole original 32, Canada and the U.S. When the team gets in, there ain't nothing like it. It is great sport, and what makes it even better is if you're that number 8 seed. In the standard alignment within the conference, and even that is confusing in the NHL. It isn't 1 to 8, but when you get in with the inferior team, let's say, and if the Bruins were to make it, they're the inferior team this year. What makes it great is the importance or significance or the influence of the goaltender. You can have an average team. And typically that's going to wear down by the second, third round. But you can get in there with an excellent goaltender and have upsets all along the way. People often point to Dryden in that example with the Canadiens and how the Bruins lost in 71. But the Canadiens also had 10 Hall of Famers in that lineup. So it's not quite there. But today with 32 teams, you got a team that really doesn't belong in there. You get in there with the goaltender, it's even more fun.
Dupes, is the league concerned that so many major market teams are on the outside looking in, especially in the Eastern Conference? 2 New York teams, a Detroit team, a Boston team, a Philadelphia team, a Pittsburgh team. That's 6 major markets in the East where there's going to be far fewer eyeballs on these playoffs had any of those teams been in. Do you agree?
Right. Oh, no question. And that comes around, from year to year. The added kind of tweak to that makes it all worse is when you look at those playoff alignments of the 16 teams, 4 to 6, if not 8 of very good teams, because of the way it's aligned, are going to be out in the first round. Because they go within the division. Numbers 2 and 3 in each division are usually excellent.
I get a headache hearing this.
Yeah, I know. That's just it. But again, because they don't go 1 to 8, and because they do this, this crazy mix master in the first round, too many good teams go out. So it's sort of insult to injury that the point you bring up, Lindsay, which is some very good markets are dropping out. That does hurt in the numbers. It does sort of shoot holes through the whole thing about, which has grown tired over the decades. Oh, every team makes it. It's easy to get in. It's not easy. Bruins are proof of that. There's a whole lot of cities right now saying it's not that easy to get in the first round of the playoffs.
It used to be, because the NHL was the first league that went to 16 teams, and everyone was like, "Oh my goodness, what a joke!" I mean,
Right.
only a handful of teams don't get in, but now it's pretty hard to get in there.
Yes, yeah. The point you're bringing up is when they expanded to the WHA, it became a 21-team league when they brought in Hartford and Winnipeg and Edmonton, and 16 made it. So only 5 didn't. It was almost like the phone book. You had to ask out, right? when we had a phone book.
Right.
Phone books. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right. I got mine right here.
Along with your bank account and your retirement account.
The Four Nation tournament had some unbelievable appeal.
Yeah.
What happened? What made it so like a National Hockey League playoff game? It was almost must-watch television in the middle of no-watch television.
Yeah, I have to say I was wrong on this one. I felt it was a glorified all-star week, if you will. They shut down for 2 weeks, which is part of the problem with doing these things. But I never expected that level of competition. So what it really points to, and it's kind of simple, is and maybe too simple, but it's just that they, once they wear, it's one of the great things about hockey players. They take such pride in their country. So once they pull on that sweater that's got the maple leaf on it, or the red, white, and blue, or whatever the colors are for Czech, which Czech wasn't in it this year, but you pull on those colors. Now, some of that is embedded from childhood, because a lot of the times when they show up on these international teams, they've been buddies with those guys, maybe on their junior team, maybe on their midget team, even before junior. They've been playing with each other over the course of, not decades, but over the course of 5, 8, 15, 18 years. So I think when you get, it's almost like the country club you belong to, but you define the country club. All of a sudden, hey, it's us. Let's defend the flag here. So that remains an endearing, sort of charming part about hockey. And we saw it in the end that it was U.S. Canada. They've never liked each other. The Russians weren't in it this year. There's some question whenever Russia will get back into international play. And when it does, and I hope it does, maybe not so much for sport, but for the rest of the world and world order, that's going to be one heated battle when you see a Russian team go out there in the Olympics or the World Cup that the NHL is going to have.
This is such a great success, but as I understand it, the earliest this can happen again is 29. Is that right, Dupes?
So let me think that through. Where are we? 24. We're 25, 26.
Yeah.
I think it would be 27 or 28. Yeah. I mean, but yes, your point is we've got to have an Olympics, and then there's some bargaining still to be done between the league and the Players Association. But we're at least 2 years out from seeing it again.
Which is really too bad. This sort of by accident became a phenomenon. And if you ask your average hockey fan, they would say on a non-Olympic, I want to see it every year in a non-Olympic year, because it was such, and I want to see more teams. I want to see Russia. I want to see Czechoslovakia, as you were saying. Let's make it more than just the Ryder Cup, USA against Europe, or the USA against Canada.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, and very much like the Winter Classic outdoor games, they charge a very expensive ticket. By the looks of it, if you put it in the right place, this time it was Montreal and Boston, the fans will pay for the tickets. I think we would have had some disappointed people in those stands if the U.S. hadn't made it to the final, and it had turned out to be Canada, Finland here on Causeway Street.
Good point.
I think that would have been, or Sweden. I think it would have been a letdown, but we got everything that they hoped for. So it's like all these things. It's a niche fit, It worked well this time. I think if we're going to draw a direct analogy to the Winter Classic outdoor stuff, that's lost its charm. It's on a certain level. It hasn't garnered the national TV audience on January 1 each year that they thought. I think those ratings I know those ratings have dissipated. They are a great event if you go to them. In terms of hockey experience and brotherhood, you go to this big arena and there's 75, 60, 50, 60, 75,000 people there to see hockey. And as I've said a number of times, it's all great until you're in a football stadium and they drop the puck and most of the crowd, kind of like Fenway for a baseball game, most of the crowd is looking at it and saying, what the hell's going on out there? I can't see it. So it's a very, very quirky fit. But this time, Four Nations was excellent, and the trick will be to sustain it, carry it through, and there are, I think, at least for the next one or two, it'll be a good show.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, for sure, because this is only a personal opinion and observation, but because of the Four Nations event, it just seemed to historically go back to 1980 and the U.S. Olympic win in Lake Placid. To me, it was, maybe it's because we're from Boston, maybe it's because we know those four kids that played there, not kids anymore by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe it was because of all those things, but it seems like it was one of the most significant sporting events sociologically that we've ever had, that's impacted our lives and our feelings in this country.
Certainly 1980, no question about that. I can't agree more. It's amazing how many people are going to be watching this or listening to this podcast who...
that is amazing in itself, actually.
Yeah. We simply aren't old enough. It's 45 years ago. It's incredible. And you can't duplicate the times. Some of the elements are there. We're in strained political times. What was going on there with President Carter and all of that at the time. But there were elements of it. This time it wasn't the Russians, and there was a whole mystique about the Russians. There was the sort of the inbred hate for the CCCP, all of that. I can't agree with you, Bob, in that there's direct parallels there, but some similar feelings did come up, and it goes back to, I think, simple patriotism of not only on the part of the engaged audience, but it's definitely there among the players. In that final, the Canadian kids, and they're not all kids, but the Canadian players and the American players, they really, sincerely, they don't like each other. And the irony there is, of course, in some cases, their teammates when they pull on their NHL colors.
That's right.
They, this better than anybody, Dupes. They still consider it their game, and
yep.
If it was just for a night, and if the Americans had won just for a night or maybe a week, it would have been our game, and then it would have been conceded back to the Canadians. But to me, that was one of the biggest takeaways I had when the horn sounded and that game was over.
Yes, yeah, and there was the whole thing about the booing of the anthems between Canada and the U.S.
You got to blame the president on that.
Against the political background, and we could kidnap this whole podcast, I'm sure, around politics. At least I could, I'm sure. So, yeah, I think in the moment. One thing, as we know, being part of a fan too, is having a short memory, because when your team stinks, like we're watching here in Boston, it's either a short memory or great resilience in terms of fans will keep coming back, whether they're disappointed in the end because their country lost, whether they didn't have those patriotic feelings before, or they were latent, or they came up just because of the event. But we'll see. I hope there's a carry through on it. And more than anything, guys, I hope this convinces the NHL just to kill the All-Star game.
Yes.
Because it's become such a horrid event from watching it. Even the players don't like it. If you can remember,
All-Star aren't, we know the NFL's killed their All-Star game.
right.
The only thing that's viable is a baseball All-Star game. And even that's a little shaky.
Yeah, I mean, I think more people tune into that now for the home run derby.
Yeah.
They went away from the uniforms, which they've gone back to that now. But the individual team uniforms, I always thought that was neat. It's like watching an aquarium with all different kinds of fish in it, right? Whereas now everyone's wearing the same skin. So I don't know. There was also, again, we're old enough to remember this. There was also the mystique going to MLB that during the year, National League didn't play American League. So it was the only time other than the World Series that you got to see it. We didn't have all the cable. We didn't get to see games from the West Coast. Well, we see it all the time now. So much of the All-Star game just comes down to it's an event for these leagues to stroke their big commercial partners, give them these kind of little gimmies or baubles. And I really wonder if you're the guy from GE who's there representing the brand, do you even care about it? I have to think not.
No, I think you're right.
Richie, let me do the campus showcase or campus commercial here, okay?
Sure.
And then we'll jump in. Then we can jump into your question with Kevin about the camping experience. Go ahead.
This is one example why Lobel and Lynch never read commercials during the Channel 4 and Channel 5 newscasts, because it takes each one of us about a minute and a half to read a 20-second spot. And here comes Exhibit A right now.
It'll be gold. It's gold, I tell you.
That's right. And then we'll get back into figuring out how the Bruins can fix what seems to be unfixable. But we'll get that in just a second. Campers. Okay, let's get back on track here. Is the clock running? You got the clock running.
Go.
Cold Springs RV has the latest in pop-ups and travel trailers and fifth wheelers, motorhomes, and so much more. You can browse their full lot and tell them Lobel and Lynchy sent you. The story is that my friend Phil and his girlfriend Jackie met, each had separate. Why are you laughing, Mike? This is a very tender story.
Because you're proving my point, but you're doing a really good job.
Well, it's a tender story. It's a tender moment. They each have separate campers. They camp next to each other. Think about this moment here. Because camping is freedom. Camping offers you freedom, and the freedom is if the relationship goes south, you can get up and leave in the morning. You can drive away. Physically, you can just drive away. You don't have to make any phone calls. You don't have to leave any notes. You can just drive away.
Or you might be abducted.
Or you can just wake up and say, "Where did she go?"
Must have been a grizzly bear.
Okay. So these are the reasons these things take so long to talk about, because I keep getting interrupted. Okay. So go browse their full lot and, shop now for the best selection of 2025. I don't know if you've done any camping, Kevin, but if you grew up in Bedford, Mass, probably not. Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire. Ware is just west of Goffstown, north of Kingsborough, and it's there. Where is there? Where is definitely there.
Where?
Learn more at coldspringsrv.com. Okay, time. What was the time?
2 minutes and 14 seconds. The whole sportscast is only 2 minutes and 40 seconds.
Okay,
now.
all right. I went a little long.
So you'll be done.
Okay, I was interrupted.
My point is proved. Case closed.
Okay, I got it.
All right, Dupes, you've been through this drill before. We'll throw a little bit of a curveball at you. One of these days, Cold Springs RV is going to build a Lobel Lynchy cruiser, and it's going to be better than the Madden cruiser ever was. So our guests on the show get to keep the Lobel Lynchy cruiser for a week.
About going overtime. Jesus, just tell them what.
Get to ride cross country. So Dupes, you're going to have it for a week. You get to ride from Bedford to the West Coast. We'll fly you back. But you have to take a National Hockey League goalie from the past, present, alive, or deceased to ride shotgun with you, have a conversation with you for an entire week, who would it be?
Who would you take, Lynchy?
I know who I would take. I don't want to say it, but I'm going to write it down right here.
No, it's Ken Dryden. I know it's some kind of Ken Dryden thing.
Yes, it was. And it's the Cornell thing.
No, Ivy League thing. It doesn't have, that's not
yeah.
that clever of me to figure that out.
Dupe's son went to Cornell.
Wow, good one. Yeah, good one.
Don't say Sawchuck or Worsley. Gump Worsley or Terry Sawchuck. Okay.
There's so many good ones here for different reasons.
You'd take Cheevers, wouldn't you? Because you'd have betting opportunities.
You know, I gotta say, you pulled the whole card on that. That's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, because Cheevers is just such a good guy. I mean, he is, and you know, he's now in his early 80s, living down in Florida, golfing virtually every day. Interesting, smart, funny. It would be a good ride. I mean, there are a lot of guys to put in there. Hasek would be very interesting, especially now. Yeah, he's in political office in Czech, and you know, he's very opinionated. He's very bright, eccentric. So that would be a fun ride too. But I think just in terms of, I got to spend 7 days here. I think Cheevers would be the one.
That's great.
You know, we're not telling any tales out of school here. That Jerry liked to occasionally wager on a game, right? Not in his sport, but so I was.
Horse racing was his thing.
Yes, yeah. And so I was a young guy, and I belonged to Indian Ridge Country Club up in Andover, and you know, the fact that Jerry Cheevers, you know, knew my name blew me away. You know, like this is like 1976 or 77. Yeah. He says, "Hey, Mike,
everybody knows your name, Mike.
You know, Harvard's playing Cornell today. Who do you like?" And I said, "Well," I said, "you know, we always play well up in Ithaca, even if we're underdogs. For some reason, it must be the good food they have up there, the hotel administration, et cetera, et cetera." So I'd go to with Harvard. I'd lay the points. Well, Harvard wins like 34-10. Next week, I'm out in the third hole. I see this golf cart bumping over things. Coming, he says, "Mike, Harvard at Princeton today. What do you think?" I said, "You know, we used to call Princeton Sleepy Hollow. We never played to our potential down there. If we won, we just barely won, but we never covered." Bingo. Harvard wins like 21-19. Next week, here we're 8 fairways away. Here comes Cheevers. So that was how my friendship started with Jerry, and it was hilarious.
So tell Kevin, you're saying he'd be a good guest for the show.
Oh, he'd be tremendous.
All right, Lynchy, that's your next assignment.
Yeah. All right, I will get cheese here. When you got to find a day where the golf course is closed, though.
we would go. The standard protocol would be either after practice or after game. It's different today, but the old garden doors would open to the room, and the coach's room would be right there on the left-hand side, very small. So sometimes we'd have 15, 20, 30 of us packed in, and he'd be sitting at his desk. And he always good about answering the questions, but either he was holding the racing form or the racing form was on the desk. And on practice day, he'd be sort of going back and forth, answer quickly because not a serious day, answer the question. You know, look at the second over at Suffolk.
Yeah, none better. He was.
He got along pretty well.
Yeah. And also, in your profession, guys, he was excellent on analysis. Down in Hartford, he was really good, really good.
Yep. No, I agree. I want to go back to the 2 things in the 4 nations. You were talking about, you know, just all the. I mean, you bring the greatest of all time, arguably, instead of Bobby Orr. So Gretzky comes out as the honorary captain of the Canadian team. What could possibly top that? There was only one thing to top that. Either Orr couldn't because he was not an American, born an American. Eruzione. And the place here we go, 45 years later, that team, that whole story still has legs. It still is been good to Mike Eruzione and all guys in that team. And I thought that was, and then with the Gaudreau sweater that he was wearing, I mean, that just brought the house down and brought, you know, the floodgates, you know, we're opening here as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And what makes it, you know, absolutely agree on both points. And what only amplifies it is Mike's personality, right? Yeah. He knows and I shouldn't even say he knows. Innately, he's that guy. That he is an emotional guy. He knows how to show it. I think over time, probably he's watched himself too well enough, because he's made a craft out of it, being that guy. But he comes out with energy, and he's fist pumping guys, and right at the right level, not ridiculously. Gretzky is a muted character anyway. He's sort of that Canadian humble guy, and that really is who he is. Although again, he's mixed in some of the politics of late that make you wonder. But Eruzione does play right into that, and the Goudreau sweater only made it sort of more poignant. So yes, it was a very good moment. I only wish the Americans had cashed in on it.
And the second thing that really bugged me was not having Todd Angeli sing the national anthem. Now I know that the league took over or whatever federation they had running the whole thing, but Todd Angeli, it's his building, it's his house. He should have been singing the anthem. Yeah,
I would agree with that too. And I was thinking about this the other night, because I was at another game and he was singing. He's so consistent with it, and he's got the operatic. That was his dream, of course, to be an opera singer. Yeah. Growing up in Rhode Island, that's what he wanted to be. Didn't happen, and I always say it's a great lesson in when you don't get what you want, find something
Well, it was a story with Mike and myself. We all wanted to be operatic singers, and it just didn't work out for us.
I'm sure all three of us probably want to be a third baseman for the Red Sox at one point.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Under the circumstances, we could be. From what I'm reading in spring training, the position's open.
Yeah. Let's get down there, guys. Let's get in one of those RVs and head down.
That's right. You know what I wanted to be, Dupes, when I grew up? The nuns would always, in art class, would always say, all right, draw what you want to be. And so there'd be a doctor, a nurse, a fireman, a policeman. I always drew a picture of a Toronto Maple Leafs guy with number 27. I wanted to be Frank Mahovlich.
Boy,
and that's every year. That's what I drew in my art class. Frank Mahovlich.
That's pretty cool.
The big M.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I didn't draw, but I wanted to pitch. I wanted to pitch for the Red Sox. There's no question about it.
Well, once again, there are openings available according to what we. All right, here's the deal, Kevin. Jeremy Jacobs, Charlie, whoever seems to be getting your attention, must realize the Celtics are up for sale and are about to be sold for a lot of money. Probably,
$7 billion.
A lot of money.
Holy cow!
I know, and then that doesn't even talk about the cost of running that kind of an operation when you don't own the building.
Right.
Which brings me to my question about the building, which of course tenants are the Celtics. Jacobs must have some inkling that the Celtics' new ownership might quite possibly be looking to build their own separate arena, and that this arrangement cannot continue ad infinitum. It's just, would this have an impact on what they do with their hockey team? Because they're going to lose a fair amount of income if the Celtics move out of that building into their own arena.
Yeah. Because of course we've heard this over the decades, and it's never changed. They haven't gone out and now all these years later, I don't know what it would cost to build an arena. I do know that this seems like such short money, but to build the new Boston Garden at the time, it was $160 million. I don't know what that figure would be today, but I'd have to think to get the land and to put up the arena, the Celtics would be reaching in for at least another couple of billion. Now, the people who buy these entities, they've got that kind of money. So I suppose they could do it. I don't know where the hell in Boston they'd find the acreage, presuming they had the money, the acreage, the zoning, all of it to put in the arena. But let's say they did.
Well,
You're right.
Bedford would be interested in it.
What's that?
Bedford would be a
Bedford, yes, yeah. There was a time, of course, over in the Seaport, and there were times that came up that they could have done it. But really, you're not going to be in the core city with a new arena. It certainly doesn't look that way. So, to your point, for the Bruins to lose a tenant of those 50 dates, it would be a huge hit, no question. So I don't know where you're going with this. Should the Bruins have looked to try to buy the team? I think in the end, what they'll do is they'll give them a very sweetheart deal to stay in the building. It'll be long term, and the great part from the Bruins ownership standpoint is not only do they own concessions, they own the concessions business. So it's such a huge restaurant in their eyes, and profitable restaurant of $4 for a Coke that costs probably 4 cents. The markup on this stuff is absolutely incredible. So I don't think they'd ever let them go. I think they'll give them
That's probably where I was going with this about, the arrangement, which of course would play into how they're going to fix their hockey team. I know it trickles down to a totally different level financially, but reality is they got to start making a product that people are going to want to see and not come and boo.
That is correct. Yeah. And that brings us to the draft in June 27th and 8th in LA. And it brings us to free agency on July 1. And they've got to try to effect a really quick turnaround here to have a competitive team. And recent history would suggest that they're not going to be able to do that. You can always spend. The question is, are you spending for the right guys? And their free agent hires over the years have not been the right guys.
So let me ask you this, Dupes. If the Bruins do not make the playoffs, do Sweeney and Neely both survive?
That's the question of the day. I think they survive because they've accumulated equity here over the last 10 years. They haven't missed since 2016. As we know, they got to the Cup final in 19. So from an ownership perspective, the building has been full virtually every night. To go back to the added equation of the parking and the concessions, it's been a huge financial success here over the 10 years. So I could be reading this wrong, but I think they stay. I think if there's an amendment to be made, it won't be firings. It could be, Cam goes to a governorship, Don goes to a presidency role or adjunct president, whatever you want to call it, and maybe they get some fresh eyes in there. Because I think what they need is fresh eyes. I don't see it as abrupt as what we saw back in, I get my years confused, 2005, 2006, when Harry got pushed out, Michael Connell got fired. I don't think Peter Chiarelli was brought in. I don't think it's going to be that sharp a contrast or change, but I think if I'm reading the tea leaves right, they're going to have to do something here in terms of managerial hierarchy.
I just can't. They don't make the playoffs. I cannot see them doing nothing. I just cannot see it.
Yeah, I know, and it certainly. I mean, I've got tons of email here from angry people who, just fans who feel the same way. The fellow showed up the other night. We ran the picture. He had his Neely sweater on.
I was going to ask you about that. Fire Neely.
Yeah, he'd put tape on the back of the sweater. Read "Fire Neely."
Amazing. So, never underestimate the intelligence of fans to do things. I mean, they are really the greatest.
Yes. Yeah. And again, that's what it's about. And if you're the billionaire owner advised by the multimillionaire advisors, I think at some point, to use my mother's old expression, the penny has to drop. You've got to realize here that something's got to change. They haven't gotten past a second round since 19. They've lost enough in the first round that there's got to be some the added erosion, if you will, is that if we go back to 19 and look at that team with Rask, with Chara, with Bergeron, with Krejci, with Marchand, all that's gone now. And there's really not the underlying personnel infrastructure anywhere near that. They've got some interesting players, no question. Pasternak is an elite scorer. McAvoy, we're still waiting to really see it from him. So they've got some stuff on the roster. This is not an expansion team, but what it needs now is a really big booster shot.
What about Swayman and Ullmark? Now that we're into this first season after the divide, who came out on top of that?
Well, I'm not going to say it's a coin flip. Right now, Ottawa's ahead because Ottawa's going to should end up in the playoffs. Ullmark's had a pretty good year. He's injured. He's been very good of late. Not maybe this week, but since coming back from injury, he's been solid. I think Swayman's a franchise goaltender. So I don't disagree with the decision there. In a cap system, you've got to make hard decisions. That's one of them. They didn't want to tie up all that money. They didn't think they were going to tie up this much money in Swayman. So you can get into a debate there whether they should have had that deal done before.
Yeah, was that? I mean, that almost seems like it was managing error in the way they approached that. I mean, they set themselves up for failure.
Yeah. I think what they do is they get convinced that they know that they think they go by. So it comes down to hubris. They know what it's going to take, and in this case, they didn't. And in fact, this is the second time they've been wrong with Swayman because they ended up paying more in ARB last year. If you remember, he went to arbitration.
Right.
They ended up paying more in arbitration than they said they would have to. Now they ended up paying 8.25 when I really think the number they had in their head was a 4-year deal around 6. But when Ullmark's out of the equation, he gains more leverage. We know what happened. So in that case, is it error to end up with the guy you wanted to get? No. But you end up paying more. That's really not our concern. That's their concern.
Well, if you're a billionaire owner, your millionaire advisors got to be doing the right thing. And if they're costing you money in the long run, then they're not doing the right thing.
Right. No, they're not. And the harder one to that very point is when you go out and you spend whatever it was, 70, close to $80 million for the new top 6 center in Lindholm and the new prize defenseman in Zadorov, and you don't get anywhere near the dollar for dollar that you were expecting. That I think that's a bigger one than Swayman, at least with Swayman. And if history proves me wrong here, he's not a franchise goaltender, then it looks worse. But I think he is. I think if you put a better team in front of him, you would have seen a better performance out of him, and he needed it. There were games this year he should have been better. He wasn't. But I'm okay with that. It's when you make misses like Bolesky and like Backus and these two guys and a host of others. Those are the ones over time, because not only are you paying out of your wallet, you're not helping your team.
Where's Glacier?
At the moment, don't say it too loudly. He's actually on the floor snoring here.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
So he must be listening.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's everybody that's watching this show.
We all think the same thing.
That's right. In my case, he's thinking, how many times is the old man going to say this?
Yeah. Let me ask you about the health of Harry and Don Cherry, and how are those guys doing?
Haven't seen Harry in a long time. From what I know, he was in the building once this year. He's 91 or 92. And he clearly had some mobility issues, walking or getting around. So Cherry's right there with him. So they're up there. Haven't seen Cherry in years either. You hear more from him because he's still a little bit active on social media. But God bless them both. They got to their 90s, and I miss them both immensely in terms of the things they would say, and they had opinion. They weren't afraid to express them. I think in Cherry's case, he went overboard sometimes on the political end and some stuff that I didn't agree with, but he's entitled to it. But especially now being around this team in a reporting role that I am, they're very tight-lipped here.
Yeah.
There's a paranoia in the organization about dealing with the press, and that's from our perspective, it's no fun. It's a tighter chokehold than that, because that permeates the entire organization, right down to the players and even the off-ice personnel, because nobody wants to talk. No, people are afraid.
So unlike hockey. So unlike hockey.
Yes, right. Yeah, and you know, I know they're good people, because I'll have private conversations in the hall where, you know, just don't use my name, just don't.
Yeah.
And just on minor BS stuff, and we saw that with Patriots too, from what I read.
Yes.
Baseball, Red Sox, it seems like more guys, and I think some of that is, you know, this is the boo-hoo session of the podcast. Our access to people who do talk, or who are asked or permitted to talk, the players, it's so minimal now. Like on a practice day, you'll get a couple of guys for 2 or 3 minutes on practice day, or after practice. On game days, same thing, and then after the game, same thing. So it really isn't conducive to reporting, storytelling. I'm surprised they haven't figured it out themselves, because the longer you choke down the product, people don't relate to these guys, because you don't get to them. There's just nothing there.
Well, right. Lynch, you know, the Millbury personalities, they were all in the kind of on the same grapevine. They all came from Sinden and Cherry and Millbury and O'Reilly and on and on. You know, it was Bork. They were in your face. They were there. They were available. You could go out and play cards or golf with them or whatever. You know, but just, you know, all the way down to Esposito or the whole Hodge, the whole group, Cashman, you know, Chinese food, all those stories.
Yes.
That,
yep.
You know, they were your friends in a certain way. If you're a fan, you could really relate.
Phone call. Do you call your lawyer, or do you call Kowloon if you have one?
Yeah, not afraid to talk, not afraid to who they are, not afraid to be something that's, say, off color, or just so. But again, everything has changed. The sport was very much that way. Not afraid to beat up a guy at center ice, and not afraid to take the fight literally over the boards and down the hall. You know, now it's a brotherhood. Now they're all, you know, they're all drinking the NHLPA wine, and so it's a different world, as you guys well know.
Yeah. Do you still like it? I mean, your writing is superb. You're still throwing 95 miles an hour, dude, and everything you put out, including, by the way, I love the stuff you write in the off season. You know, you just pick a subject and just write about it. And that must be a nice release for you.
It is. Yeah. And again, thank you. I've done that about the last 15 years or so, these second thoughts that typically run in the Sunday paper. At this stage of my life and career, that's what I would like to do all the time. That said, I'd still want to be in hockey, doing some of the hockey. And at times we do talk about that, going over to that role. But the biggest issue of all is not doing them. They encourage me to do them as much as I can. There are only so many hours in the day, and for at least as we speak today here in March of 2025, the anchor for the Globe Sports section remains the 4 pro teams, and doing the best we can with them. Now, on an industry basis, obviously not everybody agrees with that. I think other than us, only the New York Post covers every team home and away, typically every practice. We cover every practice as well. On the same hand, I worked for almost 3 years at the New York Times. As you guys know, they got rid of the entire section.
Yeah.
They don't believe in sports at all. So I guess in some ways, and they ended up buying The Athletic. And that was the stated mission of The Athletic when it started 7-8 years ago, was to put daily newspaper sports departments out of business. And to a certain extent, I didn't like hearing it. It aggravated me at the time. To a certain extent, they've succeeded. There's a lot of.
Well, what do you think's happening in local television?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And you guys know what was when you guys were anchoring Channel 4, Channel 5, what was the whole for sports? 6 minutes, maybe?
Well, when Bob started way before I did.
Oh, come on. It wasn't that. That is so not true, but go ahead.
That's why we always called him Gramps, right, Lynch?
But when I first started in 82, it would be 9 minutes with a commercial break in the middle of the sportscast. Yeah. 9. Lobel, you considered that a half hour, right? When you started?
No.
Did they have typewriters then?
You know what? You see, that is one finger for boarding. Okay.
And going back to, I have to bring up his name anytime I can, but over on Channel 5 side, you'd have a 3.5 minute Clark Booth piece, right?
Yes, right. Yeah.
Just poetry. A reason to watch.
It was different. We had packages. They called them packages. They don't do packages. I don't even know what they do. I don't want to sound critical. This sounds hard. This is not sour grapes. It sounds like sour grapes, but it's just things are different. Network television is different. Now you're talking about Peaky Blinders now. You're not talking about, whatever.
Here's Clark Booth, the 86 American League Championship Series in Anaheim. So we all affectionately called Clark the Cardinal, because every time there was a death in Rome, we'd send Booth over and he'd be the Cardinal. But he sends his piece back. He says, interwoven ribbons of concrete. This is Anaheim with a Taco Bell on every corner. And that was the Cardinal, and because while you're listening to his piece, you have a thesaurus in one hand, a dictionary in the other, saying, what the hell does that word mean? What does that word mean? Yeah. And he was like, wow. I mean, he was the standard.
Yes.
You did a great job today. I don't know what else we could add to where we are with the.
Well, we have a commercial for George Gray's Lexington Toyota. How's that?
Good pickup there, Mike. That was good.
I'm going to grab it right now. All right.
Yeah.
I'll only augment the commercial by saying our 2010 Prius just cracked 300,000 miles.
Nice.
Right.
George Gray.
Yeah.
Lexington Toyota.
2010, 303,000 miles now. Total repair bill for 15 and plus years on the road, $1,200.
Wow.
There's your commercial, Mike. Thank you very much for coming.
How's that, George? You want me to still read everything, George?
The greatest.
You're talking about my 20-second commercials. This thing's already gone a minute and a half.
Hey,
I'm only one town over from Lexington, so I'll be over at noon to pick up my free convertible.
Hey, if you're thinking about a new vehicle, go with Dupes, Lobel, and Lynchy Go. Go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. You might even want to pick yourself up a Prius, because you'll have it for 15 years and 300,000 miles, like Dupes. We've been customers for years because we know that George Gray will treat you right. They're family-owned and operated dealership that we trust and you can trust as well. Go see the big wheel, we call him, the great George Gray, at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. I'm only one town away from him. My mother has one. My wife has one. One daughter has one.
Oh, my God. This commercial's going on. We got another show to do next week, so just,
So we're all George Gray.
Nice.
We're in the family.
Devotees.
Can I ask you a question, Lynchy?
Sure.
Is that picture behind you, is that a tree or a cross?
It's the first thing I bought when we bought this place in Florida. I bought it at a consignment shop. It's a palm tree. And I could go this way.
And cross.
Enjoy the beautiful sunshine outside.
Yeah.
It's like 80-something degrees, but
nice. Great.
I was taught a long time ago, you don't rub it in. Like when you go to spring training.
What did you just do?
Unlike John Dennis, you don't wear your shades, when you do a stand-up or a live shot.
Well, that's another thing.
So yeah, that is a palm tree right there.
Okay, well, you might try a cross next time. Kevin, thank you.
Dupes, unbelievable. It's
Very
just
nice.
I don't know where the time goes all the time, but
You flew
you're a
by.
monster.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
a lot of fun chatting with you, and
It was great to meet Glacier too.
yes,
I'd
and
wake them up, but let
nobody was.
sleeping dog
Although
lie.
I thought I heard some extraterrestrial music. I thought somebody was getting abducted earlier in the show.
That's
that
your
did
phone
not
call.
happen. All
Well,
right.
thanks, guys. Always great to be with you. Stay well. Lynchy,
All right, Dupes.
you'll be out in the sun. Use protection, brother.
I will.
Okay.
SPF 30. All right, folks. Thanks to Kevin Dupont, and make sure you check us out at unanchoredboston.com.